Okay, welcome everybody. So I'll introduce myself quickly. That was a great main stage thing that we just saw, and we do have somebody from Alaska, and I stare into space a lot. But it's a tough act to follow, and I'm aware of that. My name is Matthew Landcamer. I founded a little company called Whereabout a few months ago. I do destination strategy. So I work with destinations across the country to help them think long-term about their future. That's what I do. I'm going to introduce the three panelists we have here. We're here to talk about Oregon's urban destinations, what they've been through and what they see coming. So furthest from me, we'll start with Angie. Angie Oniwuchi is the president and CEO of Travel Salem, where she's been since 2007. Her background before that was in theater, super interesting. I'd love to hear more about that. She's also Oregon Destination Association Board past chair. She's on a couple other boards, Salem Electric and Marion County Economic Development Advisory Board. Thank you for joining us. Jeff Miller, President and CEO of Travel Portland. He also serves on some board, U.S. Travel Association, International Air Service. And his background before leading DMO was in a lot of conference stuff, Metropolitan Exposition Recreation Commission, et cetera. Going back a ways there. And finally, Carrie Westland from Travel Lane County, who's been doing this for 4 decades, her bio says, which is incredible. All of these folks bring, I think, quite a long term in their roles as well, which is remarkable. So 25 years of that as president and CEO of Travel Lane County, and she's on, I don't know, a dozen boards or so. Past chair of Oregon Tourism Commission, Oregon Tourism and Hospitality Consortium, DMA West Foundation, et cetera. I won't read them all. So esteemed panelists from Oregon's urban destinations, and we're going to talk about that. I think we'll leave time for Q&A at the end, I'm hopeful. We do have Mark here, has volunteered to be our mic runner. So when we get to that point, if we need it, if we need to get a mic to people, it is important because we've got people on video who are watching live, but also some people who watch the recording. So we want them to be able to hear the questions. So when we do get to Q&A, either speak up so I can hear you and repeat your question, or have Mark bring the mic to you. But I think we'll go through the panel first and then open it up to Q&A if that works for everybody. So no question, Oregon destinations experienced the pandemic differently. But the largest cities before the pandemic, they drove over half of the state's total collections of TLT. And that funds destinations throughout the states through the RCTP program of Travel Oregon and grants. So those of you who aren't from urban destinations, this is why this is important to you. Those TLT funds come through largely through these 3 destinations. So we know we're a big state. There's a diversity of destinations, but we're going to look at these and their unique challenges and opportunities over the last couple of years and the years that they see coming. So I'm just going to start with a little bit of my experience of an urban destination because I live in downtown Portland, and that's been an interesting couple of years to live downtown. And there's this guy who I don't know if he was homeless or not, but he was out every day with his sign, trying to collect some funds, and he was positioned himself at this intersection where if you come north on I-5 into Portland, this is the first stoplight you're going to hit. So it's NATO and Clay, I think. And this guy was out there every day with his sign that said, "Please help riots and shootings every day." And this was simply not true. There were not riots, and there certainly weren't shootings every day. I live down there, I know, right? But this guy was taking this unfortunate reputation and using it as leverage to try to, make people feel bad and give him some money. Now, his marketing genius aside, for me as a destination professional, I was like, oh man, this is not what I want people coming into Portland to see. And yet this was a lot of people's introduction. So I think we're going to talk about perceptions. We're going to talk about reality. And I know Jeff will talk about what's really going on in Portland, which I think is important for everybody to hear. But it's been a tough time. And a lot of that has been just sort of perception that we need to figure out a way to correct. Okay, so I'm going to jump into the questions. This first question is for everybody. We were talking about recovery at first when this pandemic hit, and that sort of seems like a ridiculously small word now because it's so much bigger than that. And so I'm curious how you're all thinking about the next phase. Is it renaissance, renewal, rebound, re-entry, rebirth? And if we use a prefix re, which we always sort of have that tendency to do, are we going to the past? Are we looking to compare it to the past if we're doing that? And are you thinking of other ways to frame this that maybe aren't so tied to the past? So not necessarily in order. Maybe Jeff, you want to go first, and then...
I'm assuming you need to hear me on this.
We do need to hear you, yeah.
We've talked a lot about Reimagine, and Portland is a city that has been through a lot, but as a DMO, we're really thinking about what is each stage of recovery going to look like, and as we rethink about the organization, we restructured after we had our layoffs, and we've continued to change the structure of the organization and sort of who reports to who and what positions we think we need now. Because we started with PR because we knew that was going to be a big lift for us. It still is a big lift for us, but we really tried to rethink of the organization and what do we want to be ultimately, and that's going to change, I think, still over time.
Thanks, Jeff. Angie, how are you framing the future?
Okay, so in Salem, we're kind of known for being a little bit of rebels, right? So we always do things a little differently, So I'm not going to go the re word, the re way. For me, it's carpe diem. It really is about seizing the day. That's where we are, time and place. There are really interesting facets that come with crises, right? They're difficult, but it's really about innovation and looking at the gap moments and seizing opportunities and things like that. So for me, it's really about seizing the day. It's about looking for those opportunities, rethinking our relationships, how we influence policymakers to make our communities stronger. Tourism connects to every corner of the economy, so we can influence public safety decisions and transportation decisions and all of these things. And we should be sitting at those tables. And now more than ever, I think tourism has clout and credibility that we never had before in terms of just the average person understanding how tourism impacts their daily lives, the value it brings. Can't go to their favorite attraction or can't go to their favorite restaurant or their sporting events or any of that stuff. I mean, our lives were kind of taken from us, right? So, and tourism connects to all those things. That's the vibrancy, the quality of life that we bring. So it's a new day. And we're here to seize that. So there you go.
You. Mm-hmm. Carrie, what about Travel Lane County?
Well, we went through this exercise thanks to this panel because he asked us this question. And I'm like, well, I don't know. And just by good fortune, we had our all-staff retreat last week. And the word that we had a rousing debate and it was very fun. And for us, the word is empower. And we are approaching how we do our work so differently now than we were 2.5 years ago. And we feel a sense of empowerment. We did things quite differently over the last couple of years. We did things well. We're going to talk about some of the challenges that our urban areas have faced over the last 2 years. But through that crisis and through the severity of some of the things we experienced in our largest cities, our teams and our work product and our optimism for the future, powered on. And we feel empowered and we feel a deep responsibility for empowering others through these social conversations that we've all been sharing over the last couple of years. So for us, it's empower.
I love it. Why don't you hold on to the mic there? We'll just start this next question with you, Carrie. So, okay, I got to get this out of the way because we got to hear about the bad so that we can talk about what we're doing and what the future looks like. So we're gonna do this next. I want each of you to describe the most impactful effects of the pandemic, and I think and all the other things that we've been through. And Jeff, I know Portland certainly, it's not just the pandemic, right? So what are the most impactful effects that you've seen, and the degree to which you're seeing signs of that sort of next stage? So go ahead and start on that.
Well, we have a combined metro area of Eugene, Springfield, and so and then we have 4,700 square miles overall, so very small rural communities that we work with in these corridors, and the differentials were so stark in terms of what communities were experiencing. I would say, to answer your question, that the severity of the impacts. We had full hotels just outright closing. You know, our largest hotel employs 200 people, and those people there was one person in that hotel for months helping, you know, maintain security of a lockdown, dark hotel, just making sure the boilers were going. And so our policy leaders were pretty intensely aware of the things that were happening within our industry sector. And the way we got reopened was a wildfire. That 200 employee hotel reopened to serve wildfire evacuees. So we're in these moments of crisis that are rippling through. And if there were positives, it was in our ability to communicate effectively about things that mattered, as all of us in the room were doing in our respective markets, trying to support local businesses and we are communications companies as DMOs. That is our expertise, is communications. And so we were speaking to new audiences and speaking in new ways, but certainly the awareness and the interest in the health of our sector is at an all-time high. And people are pausing to understand the nuances. What's the value of the visitor spend? What's the payroll of the industry combined? What are the impacts? And taking good care, I think, in trying to strategize how to help not only those businesses that are all in on tourism, like a hotel is often a standout, it is 100% visitor, but restaurants and retail, the starkness of the dependence of those other sectors on visitor spend really came up. And so I think the understanding of the economics of the industry is one of the positives that we can use to support the industry more effectively in the future.
Portland. We've been through it. The effects of the pandemic were devastating. Hotels closing. Our brand new Hyatt Regency at the convention center, 600 rooms, was open for about 3 months and then closed, which was truly devastating for our ego as much as everything else. Then we had riots, and we had a lot of glass breaking, and a lot of people thought that the entire city was on fire when it wasn't. And the images seem to never go away. And when you come to Portland now, it's not as pristine as it was before. We've got a ways to go, but it's much, much better. And one of the things that we did is created a fund to bring meeting planners in to see the city for themselves. And almost to a person, they're like, oh, well, this isn't so bad. So you've really got to see it and experience it and think about it in those terms. You know, the city itself had a reckoning around racial justice, and I think if we have we do have an opportunity where we will come back stronger and better and in a more equitable way than we went into this. And if we get that right, Portland has the chance to be one of the most amazing cities in the country again, and I'm excited about that. Our elected officials stepped up. Our hotel community really stepped up. As we went into this, we get 1% of the city's lodging tax, and we had a 2% TID. During starting this last July, our 2% TID is in perpetuity now, and we added an additional 1% TID for 5 years. It'll get renewed or be reviewed in 5 years. So we're getting 4% of the 16% lodging tax, which is huge. So we have that support. The other thing that's happened, which is really kind of exciting to see, is with the devastation in the real estate market, restaurants closed, a lot of businesses went out of business. Well, we've now right-sized those rents. So entrepreneurs are coming back in with really an economic model that works again, because it was beginning not to work the way Portland was. So that's been exciting, the number of restaurants that we've seen start to come back.
Well, I would echo a lot of the things that my colleagues have said here. In Salem, we represent 2 counties, Marion County, Polk County, about 27 cities. When COVID hit, we lost 85% of our revenue overnight. It was moving from panic to pivot, and how do you manage that? Layoffs and all those things happened, crunching down the budget to just essentials. But one of the things that really was kind of a blessing, honestly. I couldn't have seen it all the years before that, but about 6 years prior, we had started working on our TID, our Tourism Improvement District. Our district went into effect January of 20 and started collecting that 2%. And so when we lost pretty much everything, and if you'll recall, and many of you will remember this, we were being questioned about what's our value. If you can't market to bring people in because nobody can travel, then what? Just shut your doors. We don't need you anymore. So we really had to rethink our value and all of those things. And so I had conversations with our TID board and said, what do you guys want to do? We don't want our destination to go dark. That would be devastating. We'd lose all that market share, all the work that we've been doing all these years. Would you guys be willing to give us operational funding for the next 3 months? And they said, yes, and we'll give it to you for 6 months. So those dollars were truly life-saving for us. To this day, like I look at our hoteliers and I always get a little choked up. It's because we're still kind of close to that. But they really took the lead. And it wasn't just about saving Travel Salem, they were saving the industry. They were so selfless in that decision. They really understood. They know the value of tourism to the hearts of our economies and our communities. So super grateful for that. Like Carrie mentioned, we got hit with wildfires and we got hit with ice storms. The ice storm was once in a generation. You had 4 inches of ice on these power lines that literally snapped the power lines, the poles that hold them up, in half, the weight of that ice. Unbelievable damage. And unfortunately, our residents fled to our hotels. And that, propped up our hotel system as well. So unfortunately, our TOT never really dipped as far as we thought it was going to dip. But it was on the backs of our community, sadly. But our ADRs, our RevPARs are higher than they've ever been. Record numbers for 13 months, month over month over month. Incredible growth. Out of the darkness, we come into the light, so to speak, and facing forward.
Hold on to that.
Okay.
You've got 2 now.
I do. I'm going to
You
echo
can do
or
it in
reverb
stereo.
or something
Yeah.
here.
So we've been talking about the destinations of Salem, Portland, and Eugene, but thinking about the destination organization, I hesitate to say DMO after yesterday's panel, Carrie. DXO maybe, it's the unknown letter in the middle. But thinking about your organizations, what fundamentally changed about the way you operate during all of this? So if you'd go ahead and answer first, then we'll come back.
Yeah, and I'll just play off of that for just a quick second. Alana's sitting here. I remember our conversation around the table when we were talking about what do we want to name ODMO, the Oregon Destination Marketing Organization. And we were bantering around whether we wanted the M in there. And we deliberately said, no, Oregon Destination Association. We were kind of ahead of the curve there a little bit back in the day. Anyway, oh gosh, what was the question? Okay.
What changed about the organization itself, about your
Oh my gosh.
about how you operate?
Yeah. Oh, we just fly by the seat of our pants, I mean, there's no forethought whatsoever, I swear. Well, there's a few things that really have changed us forever. For a while, we created our 5-year strategic plan a couple of years before COVID hit. And in that period of time, we were envisioning resident engagement. We really wanted to start talking more to and connecting with our residents. We understood the power of that. That if it's a wonderful place to live, it's going to be a wonderful place to visit, right? We needed to engage our residents in our conversations around how we do business, what our strategic vision was for our region, what types of group business do we recruit in, what kinds of sports tournaments and groups do we recruit in, what kinds of destination development projects do we take on. We wanted to involve our community in that conversation, but we didn't have the bandwidth at that point. So we were 2 years into the plan, still didn't have the bandwidth to execute that. COVID hit and the pivot happens. So took existing staff that were left and we started this focus on community engagement. We started working with our 18 neighborhood associations to have that conversation. The conversation was not only the value of tourism, but we asked them, when are you going to be ready to welcome visitors back? What's your comfort level? How comfortable are you going to the restaurants? And they were giving us all this feedback that helped us have the intelligence that we needed to make some strategic decisions. And that conversation continues, that work continues, and it's getting deeper and broader, and we're really excited about that. So that part really, really changed. Let me look at my notes, sorry. The types, let's see. I think that's it.
Okay. Jeff, what about Travel Portland?
Well, in January of 2020, I started a restructure. We lost our CFO, who went off to another job, and I started restructuring. Megan Conway became our Chief Strategy Officer. James Jesse, who was our Vice President of Convention Sales, became our Chief Sales Officer. We had a Chief Marketing Officer, and then we sent everybody home. With that restructure, we really sat down and looked at the organization and said, who are we going to be today, and who do we need to be in 6 months when this is all over? Remember that optimism we had when this is all over? Those were the days. We created an administrative pool. So with the last staff, we had a group of people that were able to provide administrative services across the organization. We combined international, which went to nothing, with community engagement. Billy Moser's managing that. And then we really started pulling together, what do we want to accomplish and how will we accomplish it? We did food cart finder, outdoor patio guide. We really refocused on what was going on in Portland. And that worked really well for us. And as we've thought about growth coming out of this, and we are hiring again pretty significantly, one of the first hires was to refill the job of Vice President of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And it's work that we had been doing for a long time, but Angela joined us from Visit Grand Rapids, or Experience Grand Rapids, and what she's been able to do just in a very short period of time, both internally but with external partners, is positioning us well for the future and how we will do the work that we do and how it will benefit every community, and making sure that we are looking at that across the communities and making sure that we're doing our job.
Thanks, Jeff.
What do we have, a couple hours here?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah,
crazy.
until 3:15.
So interestingly, we were restructuring too. Janice Ross, who was our VP of Convention and Sports, had just left for a national job. And so we aligned all three target markets under Natalie's leadership, which was a Relens for us. And we had, by coincidence, our all-team staff retreat in 2020 was scheduled for like the day before everything shut down, right? We already knew it was coming. We knew the OHA was going to announce. And so we had that, just serendipitously, that moment together as a staff team. And we looked back at 9/11, what happened in the industry. We were doing all those comparisons, like with the last big crisis. And then off we went into Zoom. And we just happened to have this little overlay of an anticipated World Athletics Championships that was supposed to be landing in town at that time, still in 21. So it was really interesting. And to summarize, there were some very interesting things that came out of this experience. One, I think our team got closer. We were all together on Zoom. We were on Zoom. We weren't in the same room, but we were all in every meeting, right? Because people weren't all over the place. Because normally you've got about 30% of your team in an all-staff team meeting at any given time because everybody's on the road and they're working. And we very purposefully got pretty personal with our staff team and really got to know it. We spent some time getting to know each other. We were able to keep all of our staff team. So we were one of those few instances where we didn't lose anyone. We leveraged every tool, and there were a lot of tools, and we came through with everyone. We leveraged our 10 chambers of commerce and those communications channels more intently, and so we were working up channel and down channel, and in many ways we came through remarkably well, both financially, and our numbers are very strong now too. We've rebounded. These two smaller cities have rebounded more quickly than Portland. We have 4,000 rooms. Angie's got less than that. Jeff's got 25,000 rooms. And so the disparities in what we're dealing with, we are not three similar markets. Jeff is alone in the intensity that he faces and traditionally generates 42% of our state's room tax in the greater Portland market. We're like 6%. Angie's less than that. So these are not the same stories. And it's really interesting to compare and contrast not only urban to rural, but even amongst these three markets. And I have to just say, in closing on the opportunities, it was very stark as we looked at these markets. We all know that leisure was a champion for us, and our destination, our shared destination, and the construct of Oregon helped our industry. But sports has really been a real help for the metro areas, because we've all generated room demand out of sports events that has saved our bacon. We couldn't have done it. We didn't have the opportunity to bring conventions back, but we were able to just relens the way sports worked, and we were able to garner a lot of room nights out of the sports segment, and will continue to be an opportunity for us. The last thing is that we got much more bold about talking about what we need, and in our metro area, we need facilities to drive winter demand. And we're not making any bones about that anymore. We got to figure out how to solve January, February, March, and this whole shared experience and the recognition of the economics enables us to just be much more straight up about, hey, policy leaders, and I don't know how we're going to get them to do it, but you guys have got to help our industry figure out this massive bell curve that we all face every year, and we've got to fix winter because the industry just has to have year-round revenue. It can't continue to do this and then find itself on a precipice of some major crisis.
So thanks for that, because that ties right into the follow-up question, which is about policy engagement with government. I mean, I've seen a trend just in destinations I work with over the last few years. It's been getting bigger, and I think in the last 2 years it's been super important. A couple of examples that come to mind for me: San Francisco, which, you know, I think unfortunately you could say is probably the poster child of sort of challenges to urban destinations in the U.S. Their team, led by Cassandra Costello, but also Joe D'Alessandro, the CEO, I mean, they've just rolled up their sleeves and absolutely gotten involved in city politics. I mean, they had to, you know, from issues like homelessness, transportation, and even, you know, around the construction of facilities like Carrie was just talking about. And somebody you and I both know, Carrie, Brooke Kaufman in Visit Casper, Wyoming, she was actually appointed to a county commissioner seat, which was, you know, this weird thing. Then she ran for re-election and got it. So you have this person who's running the DMO. She's the CEO of the DMO, but also on the county commission that oversees the DMO. So like, talk about policy engagement.
Talk about glutton for punishment.
Yeah. Well, she left. So she moved on. So I don't know if that's related. But so maybe Jeff, let's start with you. How have you had to engage on the sort of policy front through this, and is there any permanent change in how you're going to approach that?
I hope it's not permanent. So our board, we have 3 elected officials, one from the metro government, one from the city, and one from the county. We have the county commissioner and the chair of the Metro Council and Commissioner Maps. We have another board with 6 elected officials that's around funding for conventions. So we've always had close relationships with our elected officials. This was trial by fire with them. And, you know, the issues that we are dealing with now, and we've had 2 livability calls for the hospitality community, for the greater hospitality community, including our regional partners. We had one in October, and it was Chair Peterson, Deborah Kafori, Dan Ryan from the city, and Mark Jolan from the Joint Office of Homeless Services. We were so encouraged with everything we heard. Megan moderated, and Amanda helped put it together on the public affairs side. It was terrific. We just had one 2 weeks ago, and we're less encouraged. And it's really about making sure that they understand the livability issues downtown and in the neighborhoods. Portland has cleaned up a lot, but there's a lot more to clean up, and there's still trash, and we have mental illness, people living in tents with mental illness, drug addiction. The new meth that's on the street is making people truly psychotic, and they will never recover. And we need to address that both from a safety issue for everyone, but also with compassion. And, you know, we've passed several taxes recently. If you make more than $125,000 a year in Portland, in Multnomah County, you're paying more personal income tax than anywhere else in the country. It's staggering. But we've got a lot of funds to fix the problems. And the balance that we are struggling with our elected officials is they are building housing. They want to build housing for people. We want them to build shelters first to give some place for these people to go, and we can't force them unless we have some place for them to go. And we can't abdicate letting the MAX train be dangerous. We can't abdicate walking down the street being dangerous. And so from a policy perspective, I imagine, well, my job has changed. I would say 60% of my time is spent on that instead of other things. And we have made headway. And I will say that the mayor is doing a good job. And Portland is not as dangerous as people say it is. Like in any big city, you have to be careful. But we are working really hard, and they do understand that our industry has been devastated by not only the pandemic, but everything else. And with conventions just now coming back, I mean, we used to be, the region was 42%, we're now 20% of the statewide lodging tax. It's that dramatic.
Yeah, it's good, Angie. Go ahead.
So I have to go back just a small ways to set the context for this. When I was hired 15 years ago, the city had really dismantled our organization. So the politics were really bad, both with our city council and our two commissioner groups, the two counties. So it's taken a lot to rebuild those relationships, to help them understand the value of tourism. You mentioned I sit on an economic development advisory board. To give you a flavor of what I'm talking about, when I was appointed to this board, there were all these economic development professionals. I was the only woman in the room, and I would raise my hand to make a comment, and they would look past me, not call on me. They didn't feel tourism had a right to be there. They thought I was a joke. 4 years later, I was chairing that board, but. But the politics in my community are very difficult. And so with the pandemic, it could have been really, really bad, but we've been doing a lot of work. And I will tell you that they understand our issues more clearly. They ask us to sit at the table now. And on all different types of issues that you may not even think are related to tourism, they do talk with us about and consult with us about, have the cell phone numbers of all of my council members and commissioners and so forth, so we can stay in touch and they can reach me as needed. But the last council presentation I did, for our annual report, I get 3 minutes to talk about what we accomplished in a year. That's very difficult to do, and I'm a fast talker, but very difficult to do. But when I got done, they actually, it was on a Zoom, they actually, almost like a standing ovation, not just for Travel Salem, but really for what the industry had sustained and their recognition of the value of the industry. It was really powerful. We've been engaging with them about the homelessness issues in our community, quite severe. All of the major arteries into our city are lined with tents. You see the mental damage. It's visible right in front of you. It's really sad. During COVID, it was unbelievably worse. We were all homebound. I was really working from home for a year. When I came back out, Wallace Marine Park, beautiful park on the river, was a tent city. I'd never seen anything like it before. And then we were getting ready to host Ironman, and they cleaned everything up for that. And you could feel a sense of relief. You could feel like a deep breath, a sigh from the community, but it's kind of back to where it was. The conversations that we're having around how to deal with these issues, they're downstream. And a good friend of mine and a good friend of Carrie's, Randy Harrington, talks about, he tells this story. He says he and his buddy were out fishing on this river. They're casting their flies out there, having a good time, peaceful time, and they see this baby floating down the river. And they're like, oh my God. And they run, they throw their poles, and they run over and they grab the baby, and they carefully carry it over to the side, and they're like, what the heck is this baby doing here? And they look back, and another baby's coming down. They run out and they grab that baby, and they carefully carry. Babies are just coming down the river. They're like, oh my God. And all of a sudden, Randy sees his friend walking up the bank upstream. He's like, dude, where are you going? We got babies coming down the river. He's like, I'm going upstream to figure out who's putting the babies in the water. And those are the issues we're dealing with here in terms of the homelessness issues. So we're really, it's a struggle. It's a lot of times Band-Aids. These camps are moving to different locations, but the problems are not being solved. We're providing some housing that gets some folks off. So the city of Salem provided 100 homes to 100 of the most needy homeless folks in our community. When they pulled those folks out of the system, what actually happened is it made it worse, because those folks had been living homeless in that fashion for decades. They were actually the brain trust of the homeless community. They set the rules, they understood how things worked. They were kind of like the leaders within those homeless communities. And when they pulled them out of that system and gave them housing, now these folks are out there just, it was chaos. It got way worse. We're in that way worse moment still. So the policy on that side is treacherous, but we have to be at the table. We want to be compassionate. We want to bring solutions. We want to be part of the solution. But how do you move the needle on that? I don't think any of us have figured that out. That's why the problems are so bad across most of our communities. So devastating, but we're going to stick to it. And tourism does have a seat at all those tables. So.
And this is not about our cities, and it's not even about our state. This is a huge societal issue. It's all the way up and down the I-5 corridor, from the border with Canada down to the border with Mexico. We have a problem, and it's not even just in the western U.S., but I think the I-5 corridor is particularly troublesome because of drugs coming in over the southern border, and it just being a major channel for problems. So all of our communities, large and small, are trying to deal with these illnesses. And then, to speak to your question, in the Eugene-Springfield metro area, we have 2 city governments and a county government, all co-located within 1 square mile. And one government is challenging enough, but when you have 3, it's really it's challenging, because they're trying to work cooperatively and mind their own lanes, and they're all somewhat adverse to being the government unit that takes on the most risk. They want shared risk. And so when you're trying to do destination planning and you have 3 governmental units and they're all trying to be very mindful about investment of public resources, it just gets it gets really complicated. And we're working on facility issues, and they all kind of would prefer for another government to be the public champion of getting economic development projects off the ground in a shared community where the values and the community values are not super strong pro-growth. We're in the Eugene-Springfield area. We have a community value of very modest growth and a strong sense of humility about what a community should look like. And we're the home of the University of Oregon, which drives tremendous facility development that is both a huge blessing, and also some people in the community aren't that excited about it. So those are really complicating issues in the urban environments, even more so than in the rural environments, where you have all these dynamics taking place, and everybody's trying to do the right thing and in a measured way. I do think we have some opportunities because of the things that we've just shared with you in terms of perspective building that this crisis has brought on from the economic perspective, but you still have all these other pressures that come to bear, and they all have to be woven together.
So I'm conscious of time, and I want to make sure we leave the audience some time to ask questions. I'm going to go individual questions for the 3 of you now, before we wrap up. So Carrie, question for you. You're holding the mic. What do you identify as the greatest barriers to your destination success? And what goals do you have in mind beyond this next phase of empowerment that you described?
Well, I just articulated them, I think, pretty well. We do have really burgeoning air service, which helps us tremendously. So we've got Southwest now. They just added San Jose this week, starting June 5th, with daily service year-round to San Jose. We've had tremendous gains in air service during the pandemic, 3 new carriers, multiple destinations. That's a tremendous opportunity for us, although we're right in the middle of talking about climate change, and jet travel isn't really the pathway to success in solving the climate issue. And then we need winter facility development, and we have some challenges. We've got our baseball team needs a new stadium, and that we want them to be successful and get that stadium, but it's not going to drive a lot of room demand for us. So we were making gains, and we find ourselves in a little moment of not wanting to do harm to a local ball team that we want to keep. And at the same time, we need to drive this other project forward. So we're trying to do that mindfully, be supportive, and yet get to where we need to go. And I think the common recognition, helps us try and do that. But we've got highs and lows, and we're trying to work through them.
Thanks. Angie, question for you next. Could you describe unforeseen impacts the pandemic had in Salem, and challenges you've had to confront that you didn't before? I mean, maybe you've already touched on some of them, but what comes to mind when?
Well, I can talk about 2 or 3 things really, hopefully quick. How much time do we have?
We've got about 18 minutes.
Okay. I'll only take about 17 and a half, so you good with that, Jeff? The pandemic did open some doors for us, unbelievable, frankly. Ironman was looking to come to Oregon for a very long time. That was one of the places that they had never been, and man, they love Oregon, but hadn't figured that one out yet. So we actually started talking with them in January of 21, and we launched an event with them in July of 21. It was the fastest launch of an Ironman event ever in their history. It was intense. Oh my goodness, it was intense. But the event production or the partnership with that group was intense in different ways. But the public policy side, I mean, we're in the height of the pandemic. Everything was shut down, at least in our community. And so to have the conversation, we'd like to bring in 2,400 athletes and, about 7,000 spectators. People were like, what are you talking about? Go wait in the car. I was like, no, we got to talk about this. Our community needs this right now. We've never needed this more. Ironman's going to work with us on all the COVID protocols. This is going to be as safe of an event as it can be. I flew out to St. George, saw how they did it there, and we pulled it off. Amazing. Our community embraced that group like you wouldn't believe. And there was some incredible challenges with that. I had to stop a train because the train was going to interrupt the course. I had to slow the flow of the river because it was dangerous for the swimmers. And it takes an act of Congress to slow the river down, to mess with those dams. But our community rallied so much around that it only took 2 phone calls to make those things happen. That's incredible. So that was a huge win for us. The other thing is that the COVID presented a new opportunity for us as well. We have been renting our space since the beginning of time. I think we're 38 years old or something like that as an organization. And we're spending about $10,000 a month on rent. And when COVID hit, I renegotiated that down to $2,000 a month. And that was fun times too. But that also helped save us. But I started thinking, well, what's the right move here? So we actually looked at purchasing our own headquarters space. And everything, the stars kind of aligned for that to happen. Not only were we able to secure one of the last locations in downtown Salem, 3/4 of an acre with parking and a 20,000 square foot building, but our rent, our mortgage payment is going to be about $8,000, and we're going to have tenants and parking revenue. We're going to flip that to a net positive. And at some point in 10 years or whatever, we'll retire that debt, and all that money will go back into programming. So our industry rallied around that concept. Our policymakers have rallied around that concept. We're moving into a part of town. It's kind of across from Macy's on Center Street there. But that needs a little bit of rejuvenation, and we're planning to do that. The other thing, I want to commend Carrie on your commercial air service efforts. Amazing. Huge jet fuel for your community. Salem is the largest city in the country without commercial air service. We're the only capital city in the country without commercial air service. It's unbelievable. But we've been working on this, and commercial air service is like taking a Fortune 500 company and dropping it in the middle of your community. So we have been working on this. We're hopefully going to get some service soon. Very important for our community, to connect our community to the world as well. So those are some opportunities that have really happened during COVID. Kind of crazy to sit here and talk about that, all the trauma and all the blood, sweat, and tears between there, but it's all worth it. It pays off.
Thank you. Jeff, question for you. When you look at the next year, what do you see as a change or positive development that might help turn the tide for Portland and the industry?
You know, there's a lot going on. I'll go back to Top Chef, which we hosted during the pandemic and during the fires and during the rioting. They did a great job. Fast forward, we had the MLS soccer championships. Too bad the Timbers didn't win. We have a partnership. Carrie talked about sports. We have a significant financial partnership with Sport Oregon. We have NASCAR coming. We've got Indy coming back. They're working on a lot of other things. NCAA is moving in right now, so that'll be happening in Portland. Conventions are starting to come back. The Public Libraries Association, which is about 8,000 room nights, is this month. And so when we start getting those kinds of big events back in town, you see a difference, not only in the lodging tax receipts, but the energy of the city. So I'm incredibly excited with NCAA sort of kicking this off, but the month coming. I think we have over 100,000 delegates between now and July. That's a lot of people that will fill a lot of hotel rooms. So that's a positive. Billy is managing our strategic investment fund, which is to help bring events back. You know, the beer festival wants to come back, the jazz festival. I mean, we've got lots of things going on, and we did invest in some of those last year as well. We know that people have to have something to come and do. And so she's been very intentional in the way that we think about that. The other big change that we really are looking forward to in Portland is changing the commission form of government. And some of you probably have heard about this. We have 5 commissioners that are running bureaus that they know nothing about, and it's very siloed. It's the reason we can't pick up the trash and fix homelessness, because everyone's jurisdiction is involved. So they will come forward in March with a charter reform, which will go onto the ballot in November, and the hope is, and I believe it will happen, that we will have a strong mayor form of government, city manager, and that will change the dynamic of everything we have to do. And it is 5 years too late, but at least we're getting there.
Thanks, Jeff. So speed round, in just a handful of words, what do you want your colleagues from around the state to understand about how they can best support recovery for these 3 urban destinations? So Jeff, you're holding the mic, you go first.
Come visit, come see it for yourself. People think it's one thing and it's a very different thing. Most of what happened in a 3-block radius. The city is blooming. The Rose Garden is coming up. Come see us. Give it a chance.
We do have a really extraordinary summer ahead. Hayward Field is packed to the gills, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but the investment the state has made in helping host the World Championships is going to pay dividends for years and years to come in that facility. Maybe you're going to be too busy yourselves to come to the World Championships. There are a lot of other events at Hayward Field, and it is an extraordinary experience. So, like Jeff, I just encourage you to come in. It's a shared asset. It's going to drive economic impact throughout the state, and we really want you to feel some pride and ownership in that asset that we have.
Angie?
I would flip it, and I would say, what can we also do to support all of you too, and all your destinations? I've been to a couple of Western state events with DMA West or whatever, and we're out there promoting Portland, saying book that tech summit or that CEO summit in Portland. I support and rally behind what's happening in Eugene and try to support my colleague there. Support all of you here. So it's really about Oregon first, and how can we stand together in unity and in message, and really embrace each other and do this hard work together. Because if I'm suffering, you guys are suffering. If you're suffering, I'm suffering. We have to stand together, and Portland has to recover. That is absolutely critical for the entire engine of the state. So I'm always kind of a kumbaya, kind of a girl, a little bit. I'm a beast though, like I'm a beast, but I am about kumbaya.
No question in our mind.
Oh. I'm just a little tourism girl over here. Actually, you want to know something for real? One of my policymakers in my region calls me a jihadi. For real. And it's not a flattering comment. Like, and I'm just like, but I'm just like bringing in like a group conference and, doing some social media. What? So yeah, but we have a lot of clout, a lot of credibility, a really incredible value proposition as a tourism industry. And I'm here to fight for it and fight for you and all of you as well.
I want to encourage folks too. We've had a conversation the last few years about what to do with this conference, and there's 300 people here now, but there's really 800 people who want to be at this conference, and this conference should be in Portland every year, and we should be able to gather the whole industry together in one place. And so I just, as the conversation comes back around, those other metro areas are supportive of this annual gathering being in a place where the whole industry really can gather, and nobody besides Portland can really accommodate the number of people who want to attend this event. So we'd encourage you to support that idea.
That's a gauntlet. All right.
You'll be there next year.
Yeah, be there next year. So thanks for doing speed round. I appreciate it, folks. It leaves us a few minutes for questions. Yes? Alana? So we can either run the mic or I can repeat it, but let's. Okay. Thanks, Mark. See how easy your job is, Mark? Yeah.
You touched on this a little bit, but I would like each of you to expand because I am a firm believer that commercial air service is vital to our future. And so how are your DMOs, and I guess maybe Jeff, I'm looking to you because PDX is in your region. How do we approach and balance this carbon footprint against the absolute necessity to continue to improve our commercial air service for economic development in the state?
Thanks for the softball question.
Oregon Destination Association had our conference in Portland in January, and it has never been more successful or better hosted thanks to the support of Travel Portland and the community, and the city was amazing. So thank you.
It was a lot of fun.
That is an incredibly hard question, and Portland's success has been built on amazing air service, and I give the Port of Portland huge kudos for everything they've done, both on the international side, but domestic also. And it's been one of the reasons that Portland's been able to grow as fast as it has grown in the past. We are looking forward to a new flight to Seoul that begins in October. Amsterdam is coming back. The flight was supposed to move from Narita to Haneda. Yes, thank you. Which one was that? And other air service. And so getting it back first is going to be the most important thing for economic recovery. And then I think as a nation, we need to figure this out in a different way. And that's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, Angie, go ahead. Yeah.
So because I'm intimately involved in these conversations around recruiting right now, and my city council is very progressive and all about the carbon footprint. The air service story is actually a really wonderful story to tell because the airline carriers are really leading the curve in terms of environmental sustainability, in terms of the types of aircraft they're flying and the fuel. So United has purchased 100 electric airplanes. They'll be done in about 2026. There's biofuel, there's electric charging stations going in at airports. We're going to be one of the first, apparently, in Salem, in Oregon. So there's a really great story to tell about that. And for instance, we would take 100,000 cars off the road by flying out of Salem. That's a lot of carbon emissions. That's a good story to tell. But the airlines are really leading the curve in terms of that eco-friendly story. Pretty powerful.
Carrie, anything to add on that one?
I really don't have anything technical to add other than we are a heavy drive destination in Oregon, and we do have a very clogged highway system, and we don't want empty airplanes flying in, so let's make sure those load factors are strong in the planes that are flying in. Let's use that resource efficiently and make sure that they're healthy and running full.
Other questions? Yes. Mark's bringing the mic. Hold on a second.
I don't know how much time we have left, but if one of you could answer this question. I'm wondering, what are the best ways to build resilience in this industry? And also, are you thinking about how to leverage this industry's resources, such as space, commercial kitchens, and tour buses and so on, for in times of crisis, like you mentioned during the ice storm, using the hotels, just thinking about contingency plans. Just want to hear any thoughts on that.
Say wage growth. Wage growth is going to help our industry, and I know it's hard for the entrepreneurs who are paying those wages, but in terms of attracting and keeping talent, I think we're all kind of feeling good that people are making more money in the industry right now.
As far as resiliency goes, I think we've shown the world what this industry is made of. I mean, we were taken down to our knees, and we are rebounding, leading with strength. And we lost a lot of really amazing businesses. We lost restaurants, we lost, and that's sad, but those that are still standing are really helping create the future. So I think this industry is brilliant, innovative, resilient, and all of it.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for us as an industry. When I talked earlier about, the price differences, we've had hotels sold that are in receivership, all of that. Rates were high. I think we're going to see the industry grow back in a more stable way than it was before, and I think that'll be good.
Thanks. We probably have one more short question. Yeah, go ahead. Mike's coming. Hold on. Yeah, I know.
So I have a question kind of for all you guys, but my wife and I run an outfitting business out in Estacada, Oregon, and I think it's really important that folks can come to cities like Portland, Eugene, Salem. Is there any ideas or thoughts on how we might help get those folks out to those areas, not driving cars, given that we have a lot of problems already with parking and kind of those sort of things out in those areas? So it'd be nice to see some more, transportation options.
Well, we are a countywide DMO, and car-free transportation is a really big issue, not only within a county like Lane, and we do have some limited public transit that actually goes all the way out to the coast and up the corridors, but it's really not enough to make it viable. And we've been talking for a number of years in Oregon about the need for better statewide planning around car-free transportation, and it is about the economics. So we don't have the answer, but we share your feeling that it needs to get solved. And, electric cars will help, and the charging network will help. I saw Travel Lane County's name in my local paper the other day because the county's climate action plan calls for working with us to make sure that visitors understand. So in some ways, as we get to more emissions-free vehicles, that's an alternative too to some of the carbon that we're seeing come out of cars now.
I think we've all done, we've had fits and starts, the busing out to Multnomah Falls, some of those things, busing up to the mountain to ski, but we need a focused effort on the places where that needs to happen, and that needs to be a statewide effort. So we've got a long way to go there.
All right, and with that, we are basically out of time. So Carrie, Jeff, Angie, thank you for your time and insights. All of you, thanks for coming. Those of you online,